How long will the Bitcoin bull market last? We're going to be talking about the predominant halving based cyclical perspective to better understand the answer to this question, but we're also going to be talking about the accelerated cycle because remember, Bitcoin was able to rally to new all-time highs before the halving for the first time ever, meaning that we were in a slightly accelerated cycle based on what we've seen in the past, but we'll be talking about how much are we still accelerating in a cycle and does it deviate from a historical halving cycle in total. And we'll be talking about that in a lot more detail in today's video. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, and let's dive right into it. So the traditional halving cycle suggests to us that Bitcoin tends to top out in its bull market 518 days after the halving or 546 days. So it's very simple. If Bitcoin were to repeat history and top out either 518 days after the halving or 546 days after the halving, then that would mean that we would top out in the bull cycle in mid-September to mid-October 2025. Very simple. Traditional halving cycles tend to last that long. In fact, if you think about it, then traditional halving cycles have a very similar mirror image to one another. When we use the halving as that reference point, then it takes 500 roughly days to top out in the bull market. And if we do the same on either side of the halving, then you'll notice that the bear market bottom tends to top out, or at least bottom out, around 500 days before the halving. So a cycle tends to last 1,000 days, 500 days before the halving and 500 days after the halving. And the same thing can be done here. You can see around 500 days before the halving is where we bear market bottom, and the same thing happens here where we 500 days or so after the halving bull market top. This is pretty spectacular to see, right? Because we can do the same thing here and you can see bear market bottom right over here. And so it just has to happen that we see a bull market top occur some 500 days after the halving as well. We've been seeing the cyclicality and copy paste really over the past few cycles already. So it's phenomenal to see. And this is the primary technical analysis for my cycle top as well. We're probably going to see a top 500 days after the halving. However, really important to talk about the accelerated cycle analysis because we did see a never before seen historic monumental technical event where Bitcoin rallied to new all-time highs before the halving. And this was of course due to the halving itself, halving hype. That simply tends to be a situation that we see every cycle where we see halving hype, but also in this cycle we saw the ETF hype as well. So we had two fundamental catalysts which really impacted price, and that's why we see this real change and deviation from historical cyclicality in the price action. However, we see that Bitcoin rallied to new all-time highs 30 days before the halving, whereas we tend to see Bitcoin reach new all-time highs only 214 days after the halving. So if we go to this cycle, for example, we rallied to new all-time highs 214 days after the halving, and in this cycle as well we rallied to new all-time highs only 214 days after the halving. So if Bitcoin rallied to new all-time highs 30 days before the halving, that means that it was in mid-March accelerating in the cycle by 214 days plus 30, right? So it was accelerating by 214 days after the halving, which is what we see historically, plus the 30 days that took, or at least rallied before the halving. 30 days before the halving is where we rallied to new all-time highs, which led to a grand total of a rate of acceleration which was near 260 days. But now fast forward to today, end of August, where we have simply seen price consolidate for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months now around the old all-time high region. That has significantly slowed down the acceleration in the cycle. We've seen a lot of mean reversion in that respect. We've seen deceleration in the cycle. The 6-month consolidation period was very beneficial to slowing the cycle down. And if we think about the 6 months since then, it's really been beneficial for this cycle. It's not been exactly 6 months since the new all-time highs have been in, because this was in mid-March and now we're just beyond mid-August. So that is just 5 months in total. So we have 5 months in the bag when it comes to the reduction in rate of acceleration. So 150 days. So if Bitcoin was accelerating in the cycle by 260 days and it's been reducing in this acceleration by 150 days, then that remaining rate of acceleration means that we are still accelerating in the cycle by approximately 100 days. And this is going to be quite important. Hold that figure in your mind, because that's going to be quite important in terms of how much we might have to see remaining acceleration in this cycle based on what tends to occur historically in breakouts from reaccumulation ranges, because this isn't necessarily out of the ordinary. Reaccumulation around old all-time high regions. This black level here is the old all-time high resistance area, and you can see that across time we tend to see in these green circled regions that Bitcoin simply tends to reaccumulate in and around this old all-time high region. Sometimes it's a short reaccumulation, sometimes it's a longer one, but a more volatile, zigzaggy one, and sometimes it's a very short one with no real zigzagging, and sometimes it can be an extended one, but a very clean range otherwise, because even though we've seen a lot of volatility here, this was pretty much zigzagging price action, whereas here you'd see a lot of volatility, higher lows of course, but not a simple range which was relatively narrow. This was quite a wide range with lots of volatile price action. We just seen here a lot of volatile price action, but within a relatively narrow range. But we are seeing extended consolidation around old all-time high regions. And yes, this is one of the longest times that we've seen this consolidation around old all-time highs take place, but this consolidation isn't in of itself out of the ordinary. It's just simply longer than usual. So that's really important to take into account. But when it comes to these historical reaccumulation ranges, they also tend to occur around the halving event, and most of that range develops after the halving event. So you can see here in 2020, only a slight portion, only a fraction of that range developed before the halving, but most of it took place after the halving. In this case, we see that most of that range is developing after the halving as well. And when it comes to breakouts into the parabolic phase of the cycle, because in the post-halving reaccumulation, we tend to see price simply meander at current levels, moving sideways for the most part, but it's this phase that precedes a breakout into the post-halving parabolic phase. So this reaccumulation is going to get us with time into the parabolic phase, like we've seen many times in the past before, not just 2020 where we broke out from that reaccumulation range, but also 2016 where we saw a reaccumulation phase take place for 150 days after the halving before breaking out to new all-time highs and beyond, and the parabolic phase in the cycle. So in 2020, it took 160 days in this reaccumulation range before breaking out into the parabolic phase of the cycle. So we're currently 126 days after the halving. So we still have over a month or so to see price break out from this reaccumulation range into the parabolic phase of the cycle, which brings me to my next point, because historically we are still 100 days accelerating in the cycle. So if it means for us that to be on time with history, we need to break out in the next 30 or 40 days, that would still mean that we're going to be accelerating in the cycle by 100 days minus 30 or 40 days. So it would still be 60 to 70 days of acceleration in the cycle, essentially remaining acceleration. So that just means if we break out in 30 to 40 days, we will reduce the acceleration further to just 60 days or 70 days. But that still means that we're going to be accelerating in the cycle by 60 to 70 days. So do we need to break out right on time with history, or can we still extend and just move a little bit more sideways for that additional 70 or 60-day period to reduce the rate of acceleration in the cycle and break out afterwards? That's an interesting question, because if we were to break out right on time and we have that rate of acceleration of 70 to 60 days, then maybe we need to factor that in the bull market top not occurring in mid-September to mid-October 2025, but maybe 2 months or so earlier. Maybe that would be mid-July 2025. Maybe that would be mid-August, or maybe early July. It really depends on when we break out from this reaccumulation phase, and it really depends if we're just going to continue moving sideways and break out a little bit later in the cycle. So that's an interesting point to keep in mind. And also the fact that maybe in this cycle it was 518 days after the halving to reach the bull market top, whereas here it took a month longer, so 546 days. So are we seeing maybe some cycle extension by 1 month at a time? And if we have 2 months of acceleration and normal extension by a month, maybe that cancels itself out, and maybe in the end we top out just a month earlier. It really does depend when we break out from this reaccumulation range, because that's going to give us an idea as to how long this parabolic phase in the cycle will last. But the main gist is that this rate of acceleration is no longer too important, because we've managed to consolidate for almost 6 months now. And if we have that remaining acceleration in the cycle, then that's only going to have an impact of a month or two in topping out in the cycle. So historically, we should be topping out in mid-September to mid-October 2025. And if the rate of acceleration still persists, even if it's minimal, maybe we just top out a month or two earlier. Thank you so much for watching today's video. Subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.